You're listening to NES Chat, brought to you by NES Fircroft, International Workforce Solutions Specialist.
Hello and welcome back to NES Chat with me, Lauren. Today we're talking about female leadership in the energy industry. According to Fortune, 23 women are now running Global 500 businesses, an increase from just 14 in 2020. Despite a record number of women now running Global 500 businesses, women still make up a tiny minority overall. And even though many experts agree that supporting a greater percentage of women to step up into leadership will have a tremendous cultural and economic benefit, leadership at today's top companies is still overwhelmingly male. So, what can we do to narrow the gap and provide more opportunities for diversity in leadership? To discuss this in more detail, I'm joined by my colleague Shalena Shaheed, who was recently promoted to become our first female managing director. Shalena's journey began in 2006 when she joined NES over in Australia. Since then, she's been on a remarkable journey, relocating to 4 different countries with NES and receiving many promotions along the way. Shalena, welcome to NES Chat.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm excited to be here.
It is lovely to have you. So, should we get straight into the questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, I'd love to start at the beginning of your journey. So, what brought you into recruitment and then subsequently the energy industry?
So when it comes into the very, very early career in recruitment for me, it's not the most riveting story. And over the years, when I've shared this story, I feel like it's quite a common story, if you like, for people in our industry, and that I fell into it. It wasn't something that I actively went looking for out of school. But in my very, very, very earliest career, I had a stint in customer service, and this bode well for me when an opportunity with a recruitment company came up. It was NES back in Singapore. And like a lot of recruiters, I quickly fell in love with the dynamic nature of recruitment and the people aspect of it. It's all about people, right? That's our product, that's our service, that's the be all and end all. And the nature of that is that it's extremely, extremely dynamic one day to the next. And then, of course, like all recruiters, the buzz you get when you fill a role, I absolutely loved it. I remember the first time a candidate said they would take the job. I was like, really? You sure? That's so exciting. And I still get that the rare times that I have a requisition that I'm looking after myself. It's still that buzz you get when they say I'll take the job. So I stuck with it. And in the energy industry, that's where I found my calling, so to speak.
Yeah.
I love how the energy industry makes the world feel smaller and geographic boundaries are almost non-existent, right? People in the energy industry need to go everywhere, and the projects don't care where you come from or what your nationality is. You've got the skills and the ability, you're going to be needed. So everyone is a local in the energy industry, and I feel that this is not something that's found in most other industries, and that I found really, really exciting. And at the beginning of my career, I also found the energy industry to be very fast paced and generally without pretense, and that suited me really well. So yeah, that's the energy sector is where I found my forte,
And the rest is history, as they say.
as they say.
So, way back when you began your career, what did you imagine for your future?
In the early days, once I started to get into the swing of recruitment and working with clients and candidates and understanding the intricacies of our industry and what we actually do, I did imagine what it'll be like to be a corporate or an in-house recruiter. And at the time, the concept of RPO or MSP was very much in its infancy. So I wasn't aware that this happy medium even existed or was even an option. So as it turns out, it's what's given me the best of both worlds, and I absolutely love it. I love being, part of NES. That's a dynamic company that still feels like home, still feels like a family, but get very deep insights into a behemoth that is Baker Hughes, but not actually, fall into the large corporate labyrinth that large companies have.
Yeah.
Um, And early on, I fantasized about traveling for work and being posted abroad, as a lot of people early in their careers think about. And now that I've had the opportunity to do that multiple times with NES, it no longer feels um, exotic or even unusual. It just feels normal. That's my job. That's how our roles go. And I think the fact that it feels normal and it feels tangible is only a good thing, because then it makes it no longer a fantasy for anyone wanting to do the same within NES. It's
Hmm.
something that's very achievable, very realistic, and definitely within reach.
Amazing. Yeah, I was going to ask, how have you found all of these relocations and moves, especially now you have a young family?
I've enjoyed every single one of them. They've all come at the right time, and I see the value it's given me in looking at things from a different perspective and
Hmm.
understanding what drives people a bit better.
Yeah.
Where they're coming from in terms of their backgrounds, their motivations, their influences, how they operate businesses in different regions and different countries, and it definitely helps me as a leader in how I approach my team, how I manage my team, how I guide my team, but also how I deal with my client and put a solution to them, and trying to bring a global perspective into the decision making, right? I mean, NES is a global company, Baker is a global company. And
Hmm.
when we're making decisions, we want to make sure that those decisions are impactful and are able to reach all the regions and parts of the world that they need to. And as much as possible, I encourage people in my team as they're growing through their career and climbing up the ladder to do that. If they can't physically relocate, at least from their desks, be curious about other cultures, be curious
Yeah.
about other countries and other regions, and at least mentally travel and broaden
Mm.
their horizons.
Yeah,
And
we've
I
all
think
been doing a lot of mental travel
a
recently.
lot, right? So yeah, it's been great. And I mean, even with a little one, I think it's very helpful to her. She's very confident, she's very comfortable with all
Hmm.
sorts of different people, sometimes a little too comfortable. And at when she was little, I used to worry about it because we travel so much, as we were moving from Dubai to the US, and I have family in Australia and Singapore. But she just thrived. I have no worries whatsoever, putting her on a plane and making her sit there for 24 hours to go to the other side of the world. I think it only helps her. I don't see any
Mm.
downside apart from jet lag, but yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so back to your recent promotion then. So, what motivated you to strive for a leadership position?
What motivated me to strive for a leadership position is the same thing that motivates me in everything that I do. I think people might be a little bit surprised to hear that I'm not very ambitious, so to speak, but I am a perfectionist. So that is often what drives me to do better. It drives my husband nuts, but it's what I use to push myself and my team to do better. Um, and we have such a strong culture within NES that gets embedded into everything that I do and works really, really well is the motivation to do the right thing and do the
Mm.
right thing every time, especially when it's
Yeah.
difficult or when it seems too challenging. That's especially when you need to be doing the right thing. And this combination of being a raging perfectionist, a very annoying perfectionist, and trying to do the right thing has worked out really well for my career. I'm always looking at what else can we do better. What else can we do to improve ourselves? How can we get um, more solid in our relationship with the client? And our client appreciates us always trying to do the right thing. So those are the things that drive me. That has had a result of um, my career progression and me
Hmm.
moving into leadership roles. And the people that I work with have been phenomenal, right? I mean, the ones from NES, yourself, Lawrence, we're so solutions focused and we're so client centric, and that's been an absolute key to my success, is having the backing of this company that is so creative when it comes to problem solving. There's no problem that I could take to my bosses at NES and we discuss it and they go, no, we can't do that. There's always a
Mm.
solution, and it's always putting the client in the front of mind, and making sure that it's right for our teams and ourselves as well. And that's basically been the recipe for building this career. It wasn't, I want to be a leader. How do I get there? So I was doing all these things along the way. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess with that comes now a leadership position. Um, and then Baker being such a large, complex organization, very, very matrix, I've learned from my colleagues at Baker how you engage with different stakeholders, and that
Mm.
combination of being very client centric, being very solutions focused, just helps in one when they're growing their career, I suppose.
Brilliant. So, along the way, what would you say has been your biggest challenge or obstacle?
So if you think about Baker, the company that is Baker Hughes today, has what you see in the news, what you see externally, has gone through lots of changes along the way, right?
Hmm.
Just like NES, a few years ago we were NES and now we are NES Fircroft. And then within those headline changes, there's lots of smaller changes that happen in reality, right? That happen on the ground. And for me, that's been the biggest challenge, is making sure that everyone on my team and all my stakeholders are always on the same journey all of the
Hmm.
time. It's making sure that we're all on the same page, even when we've changed books multiple times halfway through, and that no one gets left behind.
Hmm.
The client's dynamic, our team's dynamic, our company's dynamic. It can feel like the goalpost is constantly changing, but then you need to make sure that everyone is working towards it collectively. So it kind of feels almost like a high stakes soccer game or football game, as you would say in the UK. But the goalpost keeps moving around and trying to keep everybody in the direction of where it is. That's probably been the biggest challenge. But then what I try and do is make sure that I recognize where everyone is coming from in terms of their differences in strengths, skills, experiences, motivations, not just from my team, but also from the client, right? What drives them? And then use
Hmm.
this as leverage so that we can all achieve those common goals.
Brilliant. So, what do you think has been or is the most significant barrier to female leadership?
So over the years, I've observed that there's this prevailing, albeit subconscious, notion that leaders look, sound, think, behave a certain way. Let's
Hmm.
admit it, it's a masculine way. And you've asked earlier how has it been living in different countries and different continents, etc. And even when I've moved around from one region, one continent to another, I've
Hmm.
definitely seen that while some societies are more advanced in moving away from this notion of all leaders looking more or less the same, it's still there. Every country I've been to, every region I've been to, it's still very much there. And some have moved further forward than others. So for women, often when they're rising in their careers and developing to leadership roles, we we often assume that we have to then look, sound, think, and behave as the leaders before us or the leaders around us. And I think this is the most significant barrier in my opinion.
Mm.
Women are either unwilling or unable to be chameleons. They firstly have to convince themselves and everyone around them that they can be just as, if not more worthy of those leadership positions by being exactly themselves and not trying to be like
Hmm.
everyone that they see, that they hear, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, kind of staying on that topic, then, I want to talk about the term imposter syndrome. So, even though feelings of uncertainty are quite normal in a professional life, women who experience them are often deemed to suffer from imposter syndrome. So, I just wondered from your perspective, have you ever felt uncertain in your career? And if so, how did you navigate your way through it?
I mean, everybody has moments of doubts, right? It's
Yeah.
all part of growing, whether it's in your professional life, your personal life. I definitely know I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. What I do have is a great professional network. I hope everybody has that, but I know that that is quite a rare and wonderful thing. Um, and over the years, I found myself often thrown into the deep end. And I have a brief moment of panic going, okay, I've just been landed here on this job, on this project, on this location. What do I do? But I'm quickly reminded that I am surrounded by very, very smart and very, very helpful people. So they're almost my life raft, right? As I'm drowning at the deep end. So I basically, when those moments happen, I take a deep breath, I learn to swim. And by learning to swim, I mean I have conversations, lots of conversations with these very
Hmm.
smart and very helpful people. I ask lots and lots of questions. I'm able to bounce ideas back and forth with them, get feedback. I think that's really, really important, is asking for feedback, not just on yourself, but on
Mm.
your ideas and your thought process. Um, I do a lot of observing, especially when we were all based in the offices, etc. There's a lot of opportunities for observing. But even now, virtually, you can do that, right? We've got
Mm.
50 million Zoom calls a day, so there's lots of opportunities for observing there. Um, and I like to think that we are able to put egos aside, and just be really open about what everyone brings to the table, and use those factors to overcome those moments of uncertainty. And it's through these interactions that I hope that I'm learning and growing, and really internalizing the concept of, no man is an island, and all that. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's unrealistic to think you're never going to have moments of uncertainty, but it becomes debilitating when you don't know how to get over there, and you don't know how to get out of that. And my tried and tested method of leaning on my network, my team, has served me very well over the years. So I'll continue doing that.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. It's important to be honest and let people know when you feel a bit uncertain, you need some help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important that myself as a leader, that I demonstrate that vulnerability, if you want to call it that, although I don't see it that way at all, because then that shows my team and people who may look up to me that it's
Hmm.
okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to
Yeah.
ask questions. It's okay to ask for help. And put themselves in that position that may appear vulnerable. It's really not. We're all
Hmm.
achieving the same goals. We're all trying to do our best. We're all trying to do what's right by NES, by our client, by our families, by our teams. And if doing that means you ask questions, you ask for feedback, you pick up the phone and you say, "Hey, got a minute? Can I talk you through this problem and what I'm thinking about it?"
Hmm.
We all can only gain from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we move on from imposter syndrome, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the term itself. Like, do you think that can act as a barrier for women in leadership?
Um, I think for women in leadership, there are barriers there that don't always apply for our male colleagues. I think that women may be more open when they're uncertain. They may be more open to acknowledging that, hey, I need help here. I don't know what's going on. Can you help me out, or can you talk me through what we need to do, etc. So if that creates a perception that women are more prone to imposter syndrome, then that's really, really unfortunate, because it's not a bad thing. The uncertainty is not a bad
Hmm.
thing. The asking those questions to get yourself out of those uncertain situations is not a bad thing. And I've definitely observed this over the years, that the expectations of men and women in the workplace are very, very different. And I think those are real barriers, because when they try and achieve the same outcome, um, how they're perceived can be two different ways.
Yeah, interesting. So, how do you think we can better support these women then, and create that culture that helps employees to channel a healthy self doubt into some sort of positive motivation?
Yeah, and I think in recent years, this concept of authenticity has become rather mainstream, and I think it's so important. I know that
Hmm.
sometimes the term be your authentic self gets thrown out a little bit and can be a little bit cliche, but certainly in the workplace, and when you're building your career, it's just so important. I
Mm.
think we need to support women, not just by allowing, but actively encouraging them to be themselves. Their womanness. I'm not saying womanliness. Womanness. It's at least to me, it's two different things. Their womanness should be celebrated, not suppressed, because that's where the true value of diversity comes in: diversity of
Mm-hmm.
thought, diversity of perspective, of background, of influences. And everybody wins when those things come into the equation in strategic decision making. And the easiest way for us to achieve this is, of course, by giving women authentic um, examples to follow, authentic women leaders who don't shirt behind their womenness, or try to act like the male leaders do. But this isn't always available to us, right? What are you supposed to do if your organization or your team does not have these authentic women leaders? Then what you need to do is cultivate a work culture where the women you do have feel like they can be their own selves.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that may be, whatever their own selves may be. No one needs to fit a particular mold. That's the whole point of it.
Mm-hmm.
Women need to feel heard, not judged. They need to see that their input and their contributions are valued. And they also need to be proactively given lots of opportunities to give input, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
women do fall into the trap sometimes where we may not um, put ourselves forward and wait to be volunteered for opportunities, and that is something that, as generations go by, we'll get better and better at it. But right now, where we are today, we need to support women by proactively giving them those opportunities to give input, giving them the safe spaces to not just receive feedback, but to give
Mm-hmm.
feedback as well. And be given the tools that they need to grow and develop. And those tools are credible support, time, resources, infrastructure, and ultimately the trust that they will succeed. And I think this, if we do all of these, we will find ourselves very, very, very pleasantly surprised by what we get out of these women.
Absolutely. So you mentioned briefly about how important it is to have those authentic female leaders. Is there anyone in your life that you look up to? And how important do you think it is to have a mentor so you can grow as a leader?
Um, I mean, I've had the fortune of working with some very, very inspirational women over the years, and the reason I'm chuckling is because, when we talk about their authentic selves and their womenness, one of them was a very senior TA person in Baker, and when I say senior, I mean past retirement age and refused to
Hmm.
retire. She described herself as a cockroach, and she was phenomenal to watch. She'd be sitting in a meeting, much older than everybody in there, much smaller in stature. But once she spoke, she owned the room, and what
Mm.
she said made perfect sense. She got straight to exactly what the agenda was and had real practical steps to resolving them. At some point, she came in with mermaid hair, and it was the best thing. And it was amazing to see that she could be her quirky self and her true self and still own her space and still be
Hmm.
able to demand the attention and the responses that she needed to drive the goals that Baker had in a TA space. It was very, very inspiring to watch. We often, and it wasn't just me, she had the same impact on lots of women in the company. And we often would joke that when we grow up, that's who we want to be. And similarly, I've observed women from backgrounds that don't always give women an equal opportunity, and are notorious for suppressing women, rise above that and still
Hmm.
on their own, right? Similar things, they come in unassuming. Maybe the first couple of minutes, people don't realize who they are or what they have to bring to the table, and within a few interactions, everybody realizes that that individual is the smartest person in the room. That individual has
Mm.
brings the most value to that discussion, and respond to them in that way. And having the opportunity to observe these sorts of interactions in person stays with me, right? I mean, I've not worked with these
Yeah.
women for years, and I can still picture it, and I can still remember how inspired I was just being in the same room, and being able to do that many times.
Mm.
Um, and you ask about having a mentor as well. I think it's extremely helpful, to have a trustworthy and a knowledgeable confidant that you can bounce ideas off, that you can
Mm.
vent to, A good mentor should challenge you and ask you lots of uncomfortable questions with the aim of helping you unravel the steps that you need to take
Yeah.
in order to achieve your goals, whatever they may be. And a good mentor may even help you carve out what those goals are by asking you those questions and giving you the time to talk through and that unraveling
Hmm.
process, right? Um, but what I found with the mentors that I've had in the past, the thing that I valued most about them was their time, right? I mean,
Hmm.
oftentimes it's simply talking things through, through the challenges, etc., that
Yeah.
in itself unveils the solution. It's just the very ritual of talking and opening up gives me the confidence to try something new or tackle an issue differently. Mentors are very, very important. But I think the best mentors don't even realize how much of an impact they're having. And some of the
Mm.
best mentors I've had, I think, were surprised that I considered them a mentor. They didn't even consider themselves mentors at all. And because all they're trying to do is to be available to you, to help you out, to listen openly, and ask you questions along the way. There's no agenda, there's no end goal for them. They just want to support people. Sometimes it's just the nature of who they are.
Lovely. So I want to go back to obstacles now. So an obstacle many face, not just women, when striving for leadership positions, is achieving the work-life balance, which I know has been talked about a lot through the pandemic and everything that we've all collectively been through. So I'd love to get your opinions on how can one balance a career, personal life, and passions. Is there such a thing as balance?
The question of work-life balance always makes me laugh. Sometimes I do it on interviews when I don't mean to, when I'm interviewing people for my team. And the reason I laugh is because I think it's not a popular opinion, but I think work-life balance is an illusion. And the pursuit of this illusion is what causes people to burn out, in my opinion. But I'm not an expert on the topic. But what I do think is that when we hear work life balance, we think of balance in equal measures. And that's just not possible. You cannot work and live in equal portions at the same time. Something will have to give to the other. And that striving of that equal balance is an illusion. And that I think that's what burns people out. And
Mm.
for me, when it comes to trying to achieve some kind of work life balance, there's two things that are really important. Right, the first is boundaries. Admittedly, it's taken me over a decade to realize this, and then a couple more years after I realized it to actually enforce it. But you need boundaries to help you replenish, to keep you sane. And the boundaries look different for everyone, right? Whether
Mhm.
that's no work at all on the weekends, or when you're on holiday, or never, ever, ever canceling your weekly yoga class, or making sure that you take your lunch break and going out for a walk, whatever it is. You need to
Mhm.
find what your immovable boundary is and stick with it. And that boundary, as I said, it is different for everyone. And it's also different for the same individual at different stages of their lives, right? I mean, like right now I have a little one. So my weekends with her are sacred. Whereas
Mhm.
in my early 20s, my boundaries were completely different. So you just have to find what those are for you, what you're comfortable with, what gets you replenished, um, and stick with it. And then the second thing for me in achieving balance is about having perspective on what my goals are. I feel like we've talked a lot about goals on this
Mhm.
conversation. Again, goals are different for everyone. For me, my goals are mainly around securing my family's future, right? And that means that whilst I'm able to, I'm going to work hard and not be resentful of the things I miss out on today, like school drop-offs or gym classes or whatever else that I can't put work aside to be able to go and do. But when I keep it in perspective, I realize
Mhm.
that in the grand scheme of things, these little events aren't important to achieving my goal, but working hard is. And again, those goals are different for everyone. But when you put in boundaries, it helps you get through, that
Mhm.
that mental replenishment. And then when you know exactly what your goals are, you know what you're
Yeah.
working towards, what makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, I think we could have a whole nother conversation about goal setting, couldn't we?
We probably could.
Um, but You briefly mentioned then how things were different in your 20s. So that leads me very nicely on to my next question of what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self if you could?
Oh my God, I tell her to moisturize. I'm just kidding, but I'm also not kidding.
Your skin looks lovely.
Thank you, Lauren. But okay, in all seriousness, I would advise her the same thing that I often advise my team members. And it's really related to what we just talked about when it comes to work-life balance, right?
Hmm.
And it's being clear about what your goals are. At the very least, when you're in your early 20s, I'm not saying you need to know what you want to achieve in 20 years' time or
Hmm.
at the end of your career, but you need to be clear about what your short-term and medium-term goals are. And make sure that those goals are meaningful to you, not because that's what your parents expect of you, because
Hmm.
that's what you think society expects of you. It's what's important to you. That way, when you know truly what those meaningful and personal goals are, when things get tough and you find yourself with lots of barriers and lots of obstacles, you then need to ask yourself, are those challenges barriers to you achieving those goals or
Hmm.
facilitators to achieving those goals? And depending on the answer, you'll know whether you need to work through them or you need to work to get away from them. Right?
Hmm.
When you know what your goal is, the situation you're in, how is that helping you towards that objective? And the other thing I tell my not just my 20-year-old self, but really just anyone, especially people who are early in their career, is be nice, be helpful, be someone you'd want to work with, right? I mean, I feel like I've built my entire career off of this approach. As you know, Lauren, I'm a returnee to NES, and I
Hmm.
don't think I would ever have been asked to return when NES first got the Baker RPO if my former NES colleagues didn't enjoy working with me, right?
Hmm.
And many successful people in my team today themselves are returnees. And if we didn't provide them with an enjoyable environment to work in, they would never have returned themselves, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Similarly, if they were not nice to have around and they weren't great team players, we wouldn't have welcomed them back. So we've built a lot of success around just being good people to work with. It's not to be underestimated.
No, thank you. That's some great advice. So before I let you get back to your day, I have one last question. How do you think we can encourage women to work in the energy industry?
I think that even today, when most people think of the energy industry, the image that comes to mind is still men in hard hats and coveralls in the middle of dusty land rigs or offshore platforms. And
Hmm.
it's simply not energy today, right? And I think encouraging women into the industry starts with changing the visual narrative of what the industry looks like.
Yeah.
It's rapidly becoming a clean industry. I mean, it's incredibly high tech and very, very sophisticated. The opportunities are endless. And it's increasingly flexible, which I think a lot of people are surprised to hear. And the part that often gets overlooked, it's a lot of fun. Right? Energy industry is a lot of fun. It's not stuffy, it's not boring. It's not slow. It's very dynamic and it creates for a very enjoyable environment to be in. And I don't think there are many industries out there that would suit ambitious and smart women better, right? We just have to show
Hmm.
them that this is what the energy industry today is and change the visual narrative.
Hmm.
And hopefully we'll see more women get attracted to not just enter the industry but stay in it.
Hmm. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Shalena. I really appreciate all your expertise.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Lauren.
Thank you so much to Shalena for sharing her experience and advice. I hope you found this episode of NES Chat helpful. If you enjoyed this, don't hesitate to follow us on social media to keep up to date with our latest insights and career opportunities. We're just at NES Fircroft. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to NES Chat. Brought to you by NES Fircroft, International Workforce Solutions Specialist. If you enjoyed this, make sure you look out for the next episode.